All right. Hello, everyone. Um, Today's lecture is going to continue um, from the 2.2 notes, the structures of ecosystems. Um, this is a really long section, but the chapter itself only has a couple of sections, so they just kind of crammed a lot of stuff into a smaller number of sections. So today we're going to go over the competitive relationship. So if you recall, we talked about the non-feeding relationships before, the symbiotic relationships, the mutualism, commensalism, parasitic relationships. Okay. Today we're going to deal with some competitive relationships within so they're talking about biotic factors. In other words, you're talking about relationships and competition between living organisms. Okay. So we have the first thing here they're talking about is that competition between organisms occurs when two or more organisms or species. So it can be individual organisms, or it can be, you can think of it more generically about between species, whatever. But when they use the same resource, so food, water, living space, mating partners, whatever. Okay. Uh, and so that breeds competition, because these are all the things that an organism and or a species needs to survive, thrive, reproduce, right? So because competition is usually not beneficial to organisms, that means to individuals, like having to compete for things that an organism needs to survive is not really beneficial for it. Like if you need it to survive, you want to be able to have access to it, right? So because it's not beneficial to individual organisms, methods of reducing competition in an ecosystem will develop over time. All right. So, what are these? Um, the first one is habitat specialization. Another term for this is creating niches. Okay. A niche is like sort of like a specialized spot or role. Uh, and so habitat specialization, where organisms or species become adapted to using certain resources and not others to avoid competition. Okay, so uh, we've got a definition here of habitat. Habitat is the specific environment, woods, desert, swamp, in which an organism lives. Okay, and then, I didn't even look ahead of my own notes here. I do have the definition for niche. Niche is a specific position an organism fills within an ecosystem or job. Um, it includes feeding resources, living space, reproductive habits, etc. So, um, habitat specialization is where um, an organism or a species um, sort of gets used to using certain things in certain habitats um, that might either be more readily available or more easily to find, or that they don't have as much competition with other species for, stuff like that. So um, I'm trying to think, see if they had the example in the book. Um, is they use in the book is like different types of forests. So species will adapt and specialize to living like in a deciduous tree forest. What deciduous means, like trees that drop their leaves in the fall and winter. And other species might adapt to living in a coniferous forest or something like that. Like different species of birds or something like that. So that would be like habitat specialization. Okay. The second is resource partitioning. Okay. Resources, I mean, the resources that they use to live, survive, thrive, and reproduce. Partitioning is when you like split something up or break something up. So resource partitioning occurs as a result of competition between species. Resource use is divided by time or space through specialization of the different species. So the best sort of one of the better, I shouldn't say the best, but one of the better analogies that I have been able to come up with for this is hopefully most of you are familiar with baseball, professional baseball and stuff. If you don't watch it or really like it or whatever, you kind of get the idea, or have seen it before. So in baseball, you have players that play certain positions, that specialize in certain positions, right? So they don't compete. They're not competing for the same job. So, for example, a catcher is not competing for a job with, a shortstop. They don't play the same position, so they're not really competing with each other for a job. And you can even go further and look at pitchers. So all pitchers essentially do the same thing, which is they pitch. That's their position, you would say, or whatever. But within pitchers, you have different specializations within there. You've got starting pitchers, the pitchers that go in and begin the game, and usually they pitch a larger number of innings. And then you've got your relievers, which come in later in the game and usually pitch shorter amounts of innings. And even within the relievers, you've got other specialists, like you've got long relievers, like relievers who can pitch a couple of innings. You've got lefty and righty specialists that come in just to face certain right-handed and left-handed batters. You've got closers who you typically come in when a team is winning the game by only a few runs at the very end of the game. Okay, so while yes, they all do the same quote-unquote job, they're specializing. So, for example, a closer is not competing really with a starter for a position. By specialization, they've reduced competition for the jobs. Okay, that's what happens in resource partitioning. Well, it happens in both of them, really. That's kind of a generic example of habitat specialization and resource partitioning, what they both do. But resource partitioning is when they specialize or sort of divide resources by time or space. So the example your book gives here is, let me see if I can get it so you can see it. 5 species of North American warblers reduce the competition among themselves by feeding at different levels and on different parts of trees. So these different species actually literally, like if you look over here at the foraging height, they literally will forage or forage for food at different heights in the forest canopies. And it actually reduces competition. Now, you might, it might seem kind of weird because you're like, well, what happens if one of the birds goes a little further? They don't. I mean, it's not like a hard line. It's not like if you cross this, if you cross the 40 feet barrier, you're going to die. Like, it's not that, but it's just the way they're specialized to feed at the different heights and on different parts of the tree as well, too. And it reduces competition. If you can think about something like, if you want sort of an easier, more generic example, both bats and birds will feed on insects, like flying insects and stuff. But bats feed at night. Well, I shouldn't say all birds feed at the day, but so a lot of birds will feed during the day, and the bats will feed at night, and then that reduces competition by time, by the time of day. They're not competing. So yeah, in a way, they're still competing for the same resource, but not really. That actually does reduce the competition because also different insects come out at night versus at day and all kinds of stuff like that. Okay. All right. So that's really it. Short today, just doing the competitive relationships. I will hopefully see you guys in class on Monday or Tuesday, I guess, depending on when you're watching this lecture. I'll see you guys soon. How's that? Have a good weekend.